If you are a fan of the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast and would like to help support the show, there's a great way that you can do that and start a new fashion trend. We have a new merchandise page on the website which features t-shirts and hoodies that are available for sale on Amazon. Just click on merchandise in the top menu and all of the links will be there, or go directly to divebarrockstar.com/merchandise. Get started early on your Christmas shopping at divebarrockstar.com. Welcome to the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast, a show exploring the lives of professional musicians of all types, touring musicians, recording artists, songwriters, engineers, bar bands, wedding bands, and anyone making their living in the music industry. Whether you've dreamed of being a professional or you already are one, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Eric Baines, and I hope that you not only find some entertainment here, but also some helpful tips, trade secrets, and ideas that will help you achieve your dreams. It is a crazy season here in Nashville. I've never seen anything like it. The cicadas are out. They come every 13 to 14 years, I think. Last time they were here was 2011, and they're like these bugs that are flying bugs, large, June bug kind of size, if you know what that is, and they come out of the ground, and it's scary. they sort of, I don't know about they make really loud noises in the trees. They host there, and they only live 4 to 6 weeks, and they mate and they die and they lay eggs, and then 13 years later it all happens again. It's very bizarre. It's a little bit unnerving because we're still learning about it. They don't have this in Los Angeles. It's very loud, and we've heard horror stories. It's just beginning, so we're seeing shells of bodies and seeing weird stuff flying around, and the noise is crazy already, and it's only going to get worse. So I'll keep you posted, let you know how it turned out on the next podcast, probably. The podcast is going to be a little lengthy this time, so we're going to get right to it. I actually did this interview in Los Angeles where I went out to do some work, and my brother-in-law, Lucas Graybill, you can check out his episode on this podcast, was kind enough to lend me his studio, where I had the great privilege of interviewing my guest today, who is the drummer on NBC's hit show, The Voice. But he's also had an incredible career touring and recording with artists like Natalie, Michael Bolton, Madonna, Miley Cyrus, Richard Marx, Paul Anka, Paul Stanley, all the Pauls, and many, many others. He was also on the shows Rockstar in Excess and Rockstar Supernova, and which, by the way, I auditioned for Supernova and didn't get the gig, but I got to play for Dave Navarro, and that was kind of fun. But he's an incredible player and a really, really great dude. I think you're going to love this. He's got a passion for education, so that always makes it interesting. And he's a fellow Berklee alum, as you will find out. So please enjoy my conversation with Nate Morton. So we met through George Shelby, doing a gig, and he's also another podcast episode.
Oh, wonderful.
And it was amazing. And you met him on The Voice.
I met George before that because I had a stint where I was playing with Natalie, and George was frequently in the horn section when we had our big band dates.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that gig, actually. Because that must have been pretty amazing.
So I am not a jazzer. And so for me, that gig was a sort of an education. I viewed it as an opportunity to try to improve my brush chops, to try to improve my big band reading chops,
right,
and to try to improve my swing feel. So that was a great opportunity for me. And it's interesting. I would do that gig. We would have our sound check from, let's just say, 3 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then there might be a break, like a meal break from 5 to 7:30, and then the gig would be 7:30. And so instead of eating a meal, I would actually go and I would pull my snare drum off my drum set, and I would take my brushes. And at the time I had a Discman, right? This tells you how long ago it was. I had a Discman, and I had some great jazz music on CDs. Mm-hmm. And I would take my Discman, my snare drum, and my brushes, headphones, and try to find a broom closet somewhere and just set up and play brushes for a couple of hours before the gig. And I pretty much did that every single gig.
Wow.
Yeah, I pretty much did that every single gig. And Natalie and my time spent on that gig is in great part why I can sort of halfway, fake my way through jazz gigs today,
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to need this microphone and these effects with me everywhere I go.
Isn't it great?
Because I feel like I should be doing the quiet storm.
The best part is at the very end, you're going to take the headphones off and you're like, where did my voice go?
I know.
Oh, that's so funny.
Sorry.
Well, isn't it great though to have the opportunity to get paid while learning skills?
100%.
Isn't that kind of an awesome
100%.
thing?
And Natalie was easy to be around to the extent that you, or I anyway, would sort of forget that she was Natalie. So for example, we'd be at a band dinner and she might say something like, you know what? One time Daddy did so-and-so. And I'm like, wow, that's right.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's
man.
right.
That's so cool. That was one of my questions. Did she ever talk about her dad?
She did. And of course she talked about him in the show and all of that. And that was, like you said. And it was during that era where I played with her not that long after she had done the recording duet of Unforgettable. And so we would do that. And there was a video, of course, of the two of them, her as a child, that would play while we played it. And again, that was one of those moments again where I sort of remembered like, oh yeah, that's who I have the opportunity to work with right now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Was Mike O'Neill doing it?
Michael O'Neill was there for part of the time.
Yeah,
yes.
He's the one that got me on the Chicago gig. So I've known him for forever. And I know he was like going back and forth between George Benson and
right. Well, and I have to be honest with you. Natalie was around. We did talk. I did talk to the band, but I'm not kidding with you, Eric. I mean, I spent most of my time in a closet with my brushes on a snare drum. Yeah.
Wow. Well, the brushes will never talk back.
No. And the other thing too, it's funny. Whenever I mention that gig to anyone, they say, "Oh, wow, you played those big band arrangements. That must have been really challenging." And they're not wrong. It was challenging. But when you're playing a big band arrangement, if you make it through the arrangement and you catch the hits, much less set up the hits,
right,
and kind of manage to swing as best you can, you're kind of okay. You kind of did the job.
Yeah.
I found it more challenging when I looked on the calendar and it would be a jazz trio set, which would have just been, piano, bass, drums, and Natalie singing, which would have meant mostly slow jazz ballads. If you want to expose a drummer who is not very comfortable playing, jazz, give them some brushes and say, we're going to play an hour and a half of slow jazz ballads. Those are the ones that made me sweat the most.
Wow. And what kind of venues?
It's very funny you just asked that, because the first gig that popped to mind when you said what kind of venues, I have a video recording of us playing the White House for the governor's ball. So George Bush is there and, all of that. So that's like the first, but that's not exactly a venue per se. It wasn't like we went on tour and played all the White Houses, right? But that we would have done that. We would have done performing arts centers. We would have done, we did a charity event and Stevie Wonder was also there, not performing with his band, but he actually performed with us. We backed up Stevie Wonder. And watching him, he sat at the piano during sound check and just played just a slew of chords that only he could make sound like that's what those chords were supposed to be. And I just remember feeling like, you're not playing the piano. I feel like you're channeling something as a conduit from another source that is far greater than anything that I've ever known. And then and then of course he would finish that and you go, what was that, Stevie? And he would say, oh, it's just something I was messing around with. Just something I was messing around with this morning. Like, what? Really? That's you messing around? It kind of reminds you of the lore of I believe it's Mozart who no erasing marks on his scores. That's what it kind of felt like. It's like that's you fooling around. Yeah. It's perfection.
Yeah, well, it kind of gets to the heart of the difference between an artist and a sideman, really. To some extent. It's like we kind of sometimes, anyways, we can be more assembly workers than
Sure.
Stevie Wonder, his only thing is to do that.
That's it.
Just make stuff up.
That's it.
That's inspiring. And
it's
incredible.
funny. I played with a jazz pianist one night, and I'm not going to say their name, but I was playing a gig, and this jazz pianist came in, very famous jazz pianist came in, and sat in with the band, and we kind of went, well, do you want to play this? And they went, I don't know that. And we went, you want to play this? And they went, I don't know that. And we ended up playing 2 of their original songs because they basically said, I've been a leader since I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
I've never had to go out and learn the real book.
Yeah.
I'm in the real book.
I know. It's so crazy. Yeah. I just came off of doing 2 wedding gigs, Friday, Saturday.
Yes.
And I haven't done one in like a year and a half.
Yes.
And like, it was a good like 8 hours of relearning, all my favorite songs, of course.
See, and you have it harder than me. See, as a drummer, I could, if I go in with boom bap, boom boom bap, I'm gonna be right 90% of the time.
Right.
Whereas you got to deal with those what are they called? Notes.
Yeah, and as a bass player too, it's like I got to play on the
Oh
one.
yeah.
I have to know what it is, the beginning of the measure.
And it's so funny too because it's so funny the way bass works because in my experience, a lot of the time, if the bass player plays the wrong note, the bass line doesn't sound wrong. Everything on top of it sounds wrong.
Right. I do have a lot of power. So you better hope I learned the song.
Yes, for sure.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So you're on The Voice.
I am.
That is your gig, your main gig.
It is.
Have you been on that from the start?
From the start. It's got to be going on about we've got to be heading into well, let's see. We returned to production for the live rounds of season 25 at the end of April. We've been doing 2 cycles a year since the show's inception. So that's got to put us darn near 13 years now doing that gig. Oh man, it's been amazing. Wonderful. It's been wonderful. Yeah. It is a unicorn, that gig.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a unicorn. And it's funny because it wasn't like 13 years ago, someone came up to me and said, hey man, you want to do a TV show for the next 13 years? Right?
Right.
Somebody came up to me and said, hey man, there's this idea for a TV show. It might wind up being on NBC. Are you available? And in my head, I kind of went, sure. And literally.
So it was a pilot kind of.
Well, it wasn't a pilot. Uh-huh. But you never know. Most shows are not successful.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So even though it wasn't a pilot per se, it was the beginning of a season and we shot it. I had done several TV shows prior to that were fun, exciting, cool music with great musicians, but for one reason or another had not succeeded. Mm-hmm. So for example, I did a show called Rockstar that was on CBS for a couple of seasons, but Rockstar long term,
Rockstar NXS,
and then Supernova, Correctamundo. And so, unfortunately, Rockstar had a very short lifespan. So when I was called to do The Voice, in my head, right? You're nodding. Now, this is not, you're not videoing this, but I just want to tell anyone who's listening that before I even say what I'm about to say, Eric is smiling and nodding because I think you know where I'm going to go with this. Yeah. When I got called to play on The Voice, I definitely thought to myself, oh, okay, this is great. This will be a great 2-3 months of work. Because as a musician, right? As a professional musician, if you look at your calendar and for 3 months, I'm good. So that's definitely how I viewed it.
Right.
Then obviously when the show came on and it was successful, I still, if I'm honest, I still didn't buy it. I still felt like, okay, really? We have a second season? Oh, that's wonderful. It'll be, that's great. I'll get maybe a whole year out of this thing.
Right.
And then flash forward, over a dozen years later, here we still are. And the show is still successful. And I believe someone told me that after professional sports, it's the highest rated show on NBC still. Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's particularly amazing given the fact that just in general, people don't watch TV.
Yeah.
Right. In this
especially
past
network TV anymore.
Correct. So in this past dozen years, so much has gone to streaming. And so I'm very, very fortunate and stoked and excited. And I hope that we're, on network prime time
Yeah.
forever, you know.
Yeah.
I got a bunch more kids to put through college. So, Voice season 87, bring it on.
Yeah, right,
bring it
right.
on. I'm here for it all.
Yeah, yeah. So do you feel now that it's probably going to last? I mean, is it always? Because I know I've been on gigs for years and I still like, I'm probably going to get fired tomorrow.
Well, that was me and Natalie. Yeah, at no point, it's funny what you're asking. There's a question within your question. Sometimes I get asked this question, how did you know you'd made it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? And whenever anyone asks me, how did you know you'd made it? I always say, I'll let you know when it happens. Like at no point do I feel like I've made it.
Yeah, that's how I ask it. Do you feel like you've made it?
No.
Yeah. No. Because I think
I don't. Yeah. Because part of feeling like you've made it is this inherent relaxation. This like inherent like cruise control, like, oh, I'm good. I don't have to work hard anymore. I don't have to keep practicing and honing my skills. I don't have to keep networking and making more connections,
right?
And so I don't imagine I will ever reach that point. Maybe the day that I decide I don't want to play anymore, which will probably be the day after I die. So yeah, so to your point, I would love for the show to be on for another dozen years, does that happen? It's extremely rare. The Simpsons are giving it a good run.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So there are definitely shows that have given it a good run.
I wish they had a band.
How funny would that be? If anyone's an animator out there on The Simpsons, please draw me as a Simpsons character. That would be the most amazing thing in the world. I would love that. So at this point, we get renewed sort of annually. We get renewed by pairs of seasons. So what I can say with relative confidence is that we will begin production on seasons 26 and 7 in the summer.
Oh wow!
So yes, so
well, at least there's that. You got you got a year's worth of work,
and that's a lot doing what we do. That's a lot. That's a lot. So no, man. I mean, I've got to have used the word fortunate about 7,000 times. It's really. I'm very fortunate. The gig is a unicorn. And I just want to add this note. So when I was trying to make my way, in this crazy thing called music,
mm-hmm.
I made decisions based on what seemed like the most fun to do, right? So I know, as you may know, people who make decisions based on what pays the most or based on politically, what's the gig to do? What's the political play here? And so far anyway, I've not tended to do that. I've tended to make decisions based on who am I going to have the most fun playing with? What's going to be the most fun material to play? And I did so. There are times when I chose gigs there were times when I had two opportunities. Here's one gig that pays X amount of dollars with cool guys in a fun band playing music that I dig. Here's another gig that pays 3X amount of dollars, but the gig is going to wear me out. I'm not going to have fun. I'm not going to like the music. I'm not going to like the situation. And I've chosen the gig that pays less money, right? Yeah. And in my head, I always thought to myself, I'm making these sorts of decisions such that in the end, if I ever do find myself on a situation that actually is cool financially, I'm also going to be surrounded by musicians that I like, and I'm also going to enjoy playing the music that I play. So to me, the voice is like the voice kind of effectively proves my theory for me.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Because I'm playing with outstanding players, having a great time. How many people, Eric, how many people can work with the same inner circle of people for at this point now? Because this band, the core rhythm section was Paul Merkovich, Sasha Krivtsov, and myself, right? We first played together as a rhythm section in 2005 on Rockstar. So we are coming up on 2 decades playing together. And we're like brothers, right? Brothers fight, brothers argue, right? But at the end of the day, you're still brothers. And it's like, to have that kind of relationship in a band like this.
I mean, it's unheard of.
Short, just slightly short of the amount of times that I use fortunate, I use the word unicorn.
Yeah.
It really is, man. Wow. It really is.
I mean, that's amazing. It's so great to hear. And is it like, I mean, I don't know. You kind of answered a lot of questions. And I was like, is it
I warned you.
Is there reading? Is it an intent? It doesn't seem like a stressful gig, but it seems like it would be a high pressure gig, but maybe because you've worked together. I mean, I'm sure that after 13 years, it is what it is, but.
I kind of like what you said. You said, it seems like it would be a stressful gig. You guys don't seem like you're straining, though. You don't seem like you're, whatever. So to answer that, or to sort of, encapsulate that, it is a high pressure gig because, especially when we do the live shows.
Right.
Okay. So it's a high pressure gig. People are relying on you to do your job at an extremely high level all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. That being said, we've now done it as a unit for so long that I appreciate the fact that you said you don't seem stressed out. Or I'm paraphrasing, but you said words to that effect.
Yeah.
So that says to me, okay, wow, it's like the guy who disarms a bomb. Right? Lives are hanging in the balance.
Yeah.
But that dude or lady has to be cool and calm.
Yeah.
Under those circumstances.
Yeah. And after so many years, he's confident.
You cut the blue wire, you cut the red wire, you make a decision, and either way, you're just calm. And freaking out about it isn't going to make it any better.
Right. That's true.
Right? So yes, we have this kind of joke that we say, which is that we make genius look commonplace. That's our own little saying to ourselves, right? Because people will come to us, but as I'm sure you've experienced playing at the high level that you play, I know, and anyone out there listening who does anything at a high level, you know what that entails. In other words, when you do it at a high level, it just makes your life harder because people come to expect that all the time.
Yeah,
hey guys, can you guys learn 25 songs in a day?
Yeah.
No, that's ridiculous. That's too many songs to learn in a day. Okay, but you can just one time because we're really up against it, guys. We really got to get this done. Whew. Okay, fine. You learn 25 songs in a day. That's the new standard.
Yeah, I know.
Hey, here's 25 songs.
Yeah.
We told you that's impossible. Yeah, but then you did it.
Yeah.
So you get punished for being good.
Yeah.
Sorry, Eric.
No,
I have a running joke. I have a running joke with one of our family members on The Voice. A young man named Raul. And I tell him this kind of thing. And then I say, so Raul, the lesson to be learned here, aim for mediocrity.
Oh man. Yes.
Yeah. If you do any higher than that, you're just punishing yourself.
Yeah,
you're just cruising.
And the other thing is when you make things look easy, people think it's easy, and they don't see the preparation and the whatever nerves you might be dealing with.
Very true.
It's like yeah, I make it look easy because that's my job, but this took me a lot of time and effort, and it's hard.
Funny.
What I am doing is hard. Don't forget that. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I'm gonna butcher this, but there's a sort of a phrase or a thought to the idea that, like, if I show up and I do a gig, you're not paying me for that gig. You're paying me for the fact that I've practiced hours a day since I was 5 years old.
Yeah. Right.
That's
exactly.
what you're paying for. That's what you're So to that extent.
Yeah.
And
back when there were studios and
yes.
things didn't happen in garages and bedrooms, that was why you hired me for the high money, because I'm going to save you in studio costs because I can come in and do 2 takes, 3 takes.
Yes. And I've been punished there before as well. Because I've done sessions where I'm getting paid hourly.
Oh, yeah.
It's not my nature to drag my feet in order to make more money. That's not my nature. I can't do it. It hurts my DNA. I can't do it. So I go in, and whereas, it might, they may be budgeting, 10 hours today, and I go in and I knock it out in 7. They don't pay me for the 3 hours.
Right. See, that's how a car mechanic works. That's how it should work.
Yeah.
Like, this is a 10-hour job.
Right.
If I do it in 5, then I get to go home early, but it's still a 10-hour job.
Hours. Exactly. And not every situation is like that. I mean, sometimes people do appreciate that, and they do say, wow, you got us out of here 3 hours early. And they go ahead and they give you, all that, that fee. But yeah, like I said, it's not my nature to do that.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not my nature to drag my feet.
And that's why you are successful.
Yeah. And I want to leave the session. I don't, I have to admit, let's use that example. If it's meant to be 10 hours and I accomplish it in 7, even if I'm ultimately doing myself a disservice by the fact that I'm, not maximizing the amount of money that I could make that day. What I'm hoping is that down the line, that person goes, yo, you know what? We can get this guy Nate. He's going to knock this out in like way less time. Let's call him.
Right.
And you're hoping that it leads further down the timeline to a positive outcome.
Yeah. Well, that's what I say all the time about LA in general too. It's especially now with YouTube. It's like, it doesn't really matter what gig you're called for. You got to kill it because you never know where it's going to lead. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah. Dragging your feet, that's not going to get you anywhere.
No.
That's only going to get a reputation. And it's a big city, but it's a small town.
Sure. Well said. Well said. And it's funny, I mean, it's frequently said, but it also bears frequent repeating, which is that you never know who's in the room.
Right. Exactly.
You never know who's in the room, man.
That's exactly.
Right? You're playing a gig somewhere and there's 3 people in the place, and one of those guys is an MD for something, or one of those guys is a record executive, or one of those, people are an artist, you never know.
Yeah. Or you're playing, I don't know how much you do this, because I didn't take the same path as you. I wish I'd known you when I was starting and you could have said, just do the fun gigs, because I was more like, I got to pay the rent.
Well,
dude. I don't know what to do.
Here's what I should point out, though. I should point this out. I teach, right? And when I'm teaching, I always stress, and I'm going to say this now on this, this podcast, I stress, this is just my story, right? I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way. Right. It's just what I did and what I experienced. I'll just, so, what
it just happens to be one of the things that I've kind of struggled with over my career, because it's like, I used to say I never had the luxury of choosing music I liked. I'm making a living. I'm glad to have a gig.
And Eric,
but it leads to more gigs that are not necessarily your thing sometimes.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And let me not share a false narrative. I've done gigs that I didn't like. You know what I'm saying? I have a buddy. I mean, I've done gigs where I'm driving too far away to do a gig that doesn't pay enough money.
Yeah.
I've done gigs like that, I just given an opportunity to make a choice.
Yeah.
I tend to err on the side of quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a buddy named Troy. I've known Troy for a million years, and he's a drummer, outstanding drummer. And Troy said to me, we were back in Boston together. So this is literally a conversation that took place 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I said, Troy, you're a really, really good drummer. I'm surprised that you don't play full time, because he's always had a day job as long as I've known him. Mm-hmm. And Troy said to me, Nate, because all you do is play, you have to take every gig and every opportunity that comes to you. And sometimes those aren't fun. And sometimes they're crappy gigs, but you have to do it because that's all you do. Whereas I have a day job, so I can cherry pick what I want to do. And if I don't want to do it, I don't have to do it. And he's not wrong.
No.
Now, the flip side of that is I always follow up this story by saying my worst day as a musician is better than my best day doing anything else.
Yeah.
And so, and again, neither is right or wrong. Neither is right or wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But that's exactly the struggle in my head a lot of time. Now looking back, being in my 50s and like I've been doing it for 30 years.
You look like you're 17 years old, by the way.
Oh,
just so you know.
I think we were at Berklee at the same time.
I was there from 91 to 94.
Yeah, I was there like 91 to 93.
Okay,
I went there for 3 semesters. Yeah. And then I ran out of money.
Do you know what it costs now to go there? It's kind of obscene. Oh, it's kind of, I don't even want to say it because it's embarrassing how much it is. That's a whole other conversation. Not even about Berklee, just about higher education in general.
Well, I was going to get to that
how
next.
Much it costs.
We talk a lot about that. We meaning me and whoever I forced to on this podcast about education, because like it's important, I think, still, but it's like there is this camp that's like, is it worth it though? And
education.
Well, higher education,
right?
College. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Kind of what you were just saying.
Sure.
Well, let's get to it. You went to Berklee.
I did.
Tell me about your Berklee experience. And this was in the 90s, as we just said.
Yep. Going to Berklee was, I used to say for a long time, I said, going to Berklee was the single best thing I ever did to advance my musical career. Then I went through a stretch of time when I said, moving to LA was the single best thing that I ever did to advance my musical career. And now what I say is, tied for first, going to Berklee and moving to LA are collectively the single best thing that I ever did for my musical career. And I say that because going to Berklee and not having moved to LA would likely not have netted the opportunities that I've been afforded. And similarly, moving to LA without the skill set that I acquired at Berklee probably also would not have netted the opportunities that I've been afforded. So neither, kind of like a yin and yang, neither can sort of exist by themselves, or neither would have been as effective by themselves. My experience at Berklee was great because I was fortunate to have had a private instructor, Grant Menifee, who was a Berklee graduate. And so before, this is in high school, I had a private instructor, Grant Menifee. And Grant was instrumental in sort of getting me set up for what that was going to look like going to Berklee. And I went there with a pretty clear idea kind of what I wanted to get. You know, I kind of knew the kind of player that I wanted to be. And in a word, that's versatile. I wanted to be the kind of guy who could be on any gig and be reasonably comfortable doing it. So as a result, I went after the rock classes because I wanted to get a handle on that stuff. I went after studio reading drum lab, you know what I'm saying? I went after private instructors who specialized in Latin music, Eddie Uribe, rest in peace. I went after private instructors who specialized in jazz, John Ramsey, you know, Ian Froman. And so, you know, and I spent every waking moment in some way musically engaged and or involved. And so what that looks like is basically all of my waking hours, I was either practicing in a class, maybe preparing music for a gig, gigging, or listening to music. Pretty much at all times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, right? Remember those days?
Yeah.
Like we used to sit in our little sort of a common area on our dorm floor, and it would be me and like the 8 or 9 dorm mates, and we would have a boombox, and each of us would have a stack of CDs. And we'd, oh, did you hear this? Oh, did you hear this? You know, and it was just such a what's the word I'm looking for? Vibrance. You know, such a vibrant, you know, vitality musically. So so I loved it. I also, you know, the fact that Berklee had so much amazing gear at your disposal in terms of the engineering departments. I remember that Berklee got an SSL console, and I remember like murmurs spreading throughout. Oh, there's an SSL console. Oh, there's an SSL console. and then I got called one day to do a session in that room. I think it was either A or B, Studio A or B. I don't remember. But the SSL. SSL. Eric, bro, I sat there behind the drum kit while for 2.5 hours, 2 students tried to figure out how to work the console. Yes, my friend Sean calls that when you're on the bleeding edge. So you're not on the leading edge, you're so far in advance that you're on the bleeding edge where nothing works. Like you don't know how to
Oh man,
that's amazing. The short answer is, it was great, and I learned things that forever inform what I do today, and I met people that are still in my life today, professionally, personally, all of it.
And that's the thing too. It's like the networking that lasts forever, you know,
forever. So to your earlier point about is it worth it, the short answer in my little experience in my life, is it worth it? Yes, because I gained things that I don't know that I would have gained in other places. And then on a personal note, I stayed there and got my degree partly motivated by the fact that my mother and father were first generation college students. My mom was the first, you know, kid in her family to go to college. My dad was the first kid in his family to go to college. So, you know, I'll be damned if I was going to break that streak. You know what I mean?
right. The pressure.
No, that wasn't on the table. That wasn't on the table.
Right. But what you said earlier about knowing what you wanted out of it is what I've always told people too. I don't know what it's like now, and it's, you know, years later, obviously, but that's what I said then. It's like, if you're going there and you don't know what you want, it's not a school that says, here, do this. And like, I think there's a little more directed programs now, and they have like a music business something where you get to kind of create your own degree. But I was just like, because I did meet a lot of sort of like, you know, well-to-do people that just wanted to play guitar.
Yeah, there's lots of, there were a few kids. It's funny, people, I think this is different now too. At the time that I went there, people would say, oh, was it hard to get in? Was it hard to get in?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I would go, you know, it's about as hard as writing your name on a check, you know? And I don't mean to, I know that sounds horrible to say, but then I would follow that up and I would say, it's not hard to get in, but it's hard to stay in.
Yeah.
It's hard to
I think
stay
so.
in. I remember there being people there at the time where it was kind of like, to your point, well-to-do, maybe the family says, oh, Johnny, plays guitar. Let's send him to music college.
Yeah.
And then Johnny gets a look at what that really looks like. And then Johnny's gone in a semester.
Yeah.
Now it's much more difficult to get in because they've done a brilliant, man, you know what, man, like that school, they've done a really smart thing, which is they've capped enrollment. That place is not.
Interesting.
That place is not a money printing press, right? That place is not going like, well, we had 2,000 students, now we've got 3,000. That's great. Okay, now we got 3. Let's go for 7. Let's go for this. Because I've talked to people in the administration there about it. They understand there's only so many really, really good instructors out there. And if you just expand and just keep going for it because you're going to make more and more and more and more money, then you start running out of good instructors, and the quality goes down, and the student that you are putting out goes down. So they've capped enrollment. It's something like the high 3s, 30, 38, something like that. Yeah. They're not. So now it is more challenging.
Also exclusive.
It's much more.
It raises the price. And
potentially. Potentially. But I really respect that, because how often do you see all manner of institution just kind of go like, oh, well, more is more. You know?
Yeah. And I think when you're selling this school as this is going to get you into the music business, there aren't going to be as many instructors that really know. I mean, that was probably my biggest beef at the time, and I didn't have a lot of them. I enjoyed my experiences as well, but it's like, I was a songwriter for a minute, and like my teacher, he would bring out all these songs, and he said, almost got that placed, and I almost got this on a record. And I'm like, are you, like, should I be listening to you and learning your stuff? Okay, you got a textbook, so we're going to learn that stuff. But when you're a school that says this is your modern music school, you got to kind of stay true to that. And there's only so many people in the music business that are also going to want to teach at a college, Sure. It's a tricky thing. So I to your point, I think that's pretty smart of them. Absolutely.
Yeah. It is. And it's funny too, because, that situation that you just described, obviously as a student sitting there, you want the person who's telling you stuff to have a resume that illustrates why you care what they're telling you.
Right.
I will say this, however, I have experienced educational institutions where you graduate in June and you get hired as an instructor there in September.
Right.
And that to me is even worse.
Yeah.
That to me is like, you haven't done anything.
Right. Yeah.
You haven't done anything. Are you kidding me? I learned lots of cool exercises and fills and chops and licks and this and that genre and so on. But I also learned from like hearing stories about being on a tour bus in Europe in the dead of winter with no heat, or like I learned as much from anecdotes and stories from professional experiences, as I did exercise.
And that's the stuff that, especially if you're going to be a road dog like me, that's what I do. Mm-hmm. Like that hang and what to do on a bus and like all that stuff. That's arguably the most important, because if you start by not understanding how to hang and be with people 24/7, and you're on stage for 2 hours, and the rest of the time you got to not be a jerk, that's something that's something that you should, through stories and anecdotes like that, get through your instructors at a place that is grooming you for the modern music.
It's funny you mentioned that, by the way, because everybody can play.
Yeah.
You get to a level where you're not getting the gig because you're like the best guy in the room, because everybody can do the gig.
Yeah.
And you get to the point where, to your point, yes, the hang is an important thing.
Yeah.
And how easy you are to be around. I'm reflecting in my head, by the way. I'm reflecting on different sort of, this is not exactly a tour story. It's not a tour story at all. But studying with Ian Froman was funny, because a lot of things that I learned from him didn't have to do with exercises. It had to do with like your musical philosophical outlook. And I remember being in a lesson with him one time, and I'm playing, and I go to adjust something. I go to move something on the drum kit, and he goes, "Look, man, what are you doing?" And I go, "Oh, no, I was just going to adjust this high." He goes, "Listen, bud." He goes, "Look, you're going to land in Denmark an hour before your set time. You're going to jump in a van, race straight to the venue, and run on stage." He goes, "You're barely going to have time to tune the drums, much less move them. You just have to sit down and play music." And literally, I carry that with me to this day.
I mean, that's mind blowing.
I carry that with me to this day to the point that I'm not that guy who has to have the rack tom has to be exactly 2 centimeters here and this angle exactly that. I just try to sit down and make music, whatever it is.
Oh, that's amazing.
I try.
Yeah.
With varying degrees of success, but I try. You know what I mean? That's the outlook that I'm coming from.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. Yeah, because I'm kind of the same. I'm like the easiest guy to do monitors for. Really, I'm not that picky. I need, I'm a bass player. I need kick, snare, and hat, and a little bit of the singer. What gig is it? Whoever's leading the gig, I need them, and whatever. Let's go. And especially growing up too, like singing through PAs with no monitors and like I don't whatever. Just let's push play.
I got you.
That definitely is the reality. I mean, that exact scenario is, anyways, that's mind blowing that you heard that in college.
No, that's not the only thing. I mean, that's like I said, man, man, that was a great experience. I'll tell you that anyone who's heard me in a podcast has probably heard me say some of these things before, but,
well, I'll edit them out then.
so
I only want original thoughts.
I know, right? I know, right?
I'm just kidding.
So, I was in Las Vegas. And I was in my hotel room and I was on the phone with my friend Reggie Hamilton, outstanding bass player. You probably know Reggie.
Very, very, very good.
And so I'm talking to Reggie. And at one point I realized like, I've got to go do this ticket, go over and play with this Cher thing, right? Cher, the Coliseum, right? This is an amazing gig, right? But I say to Reggie, hey man, I'm sorry, Reggie, I have to go. I said, I have to go because I have to go play with Cher. And he said, get to. And I said, what? And he said, no, you get to go downstairs and go play with Cher. So I just remind myself of that on a regular basis. I could be in the 12th hour of a day working on The Voice and I'm exhausted and I feel like I've been there all day and like when in the heck, and I just remind myself like I get to do this.
Yeah.
I get to do this.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So it is.
Yeah. It's my wife actually hit me to that years ago and I resisted so long because I was on gigs and I was like, whatever, I got to go to work.
Now see,
my day job.
See, here's the thing. If I ever, I always say this.
It eventually all ended up okay.
Yes, yes, we get to do this.
I'm very much behind that idea.
How busy are you with Chicago?
Normally it's like 100 shows a year.
So what does that equate to in weeks?
I don't know. We're usually out for like 3.5 weeks, and then we're home for maybe 2, and then we're out again for.
And it kind of does that over the course. So it's a little over half.
Yeah,
that's good, man.
Yeah. It's great.
And that's a legacy gig. That's a legacy gig. Like, that's not a gig that you're hoping the second single pops so you can keep touring.
Right. Exactly. No, this is a job. And those guys, they're in their 70s, but they
like to work.
They don't think they're going to ever stop.
Yeah, they like to work.
I'm here. You need me, I'm there.
That's terrific.
Yeah, they love working.
And you're playing with my buddy Ray.
57 years on the road, so they don't know anything else really.
Yeah, exactly.
Like right now we have this weird 2 months off that rarely happens, and even Jimmy Pankow, trombonist, he's just like, what do I do?
It's funny.
Why are we not working?
Cher was that way. Cher is that way. I just had the opportunity to work with her again on the iHeart Radio Awards recently, a week ago, maybe a few days ago, actually, I guess. No, about a week ago. Anyway, so it's funny. I'm not altogether certain how old Cher is, but I will tell you this: she has the distinction of having I think it's a top 10, it might even be a number 1, but definitely a top 10 single in the last 7 decades.
Wow.
One in the last 7 decades.
Jeez, that's crazy.
It's insane. But that being said, so that puts her, she's no
70s.
spring chicken, as they say, right?
Yeah,
but she has just this thing, like her thing is kind of like, I remember reading an article about her and she said, I'm not the retire to my horse farm in Oregon kind of person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, that's not what she does. She's a performer.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, whatever age she is, man, she does not miss a step. And she's still just like, she's funny and she's energetic and she's entertaining and she's man, talk about easy to be in a room with.
Really?
Cher's so easy to be in a room with.
I don't know why that surprises me.
She
just
so
seems
cool, dude.
Kind of intimidating.
No, she's
TV,
so cool. She's so cool. By the way, I just reminded myself of another thing. Another guy who's easy to be in a room with is Paul Stanley from Kiss.
Oh, Ray is on that.
And
right?
Ray was on. He is on that. He does that too. That's right. But I remember we were discussing earlier the idea that you always give 100, you're always out there, even if there's, 2 people in the room or 200 or 200,000.
Right.
So we were in a rehearsal one day with Paul Stanley. I've told this story many times too, so I apologize if any of your listeners have heard it before, but I think it bears repeating.
I'm sure all 4 of them have not heard it.
So we're in rehearsal and we're doing whatever song we're doing. And Paul Stanley is literally, we're at SIR. So there's like, we're in a rehearsal room. Mm-hmm. He's literally screaming his head off. Like he is going for it, man. You would think that like his life depended on the energy of that performance. So we stop, we finish the song, and Paul Merkovich, my musical director. I said MD and musical director, I kind of hybrided those
like,
right there.
That's a new one.
Yeah, my musical D.
Oh, you might have started something with all 4 of my listeners.
So Paul says to Paul, hey man, we're gonna be in here for a couple of weeks. You feel free to, kind of mark time. Feel free to take it easy, And Paul Stanley says, and I quote, look, man, I got 2 speeds, on and off. And I was like, that's why you're Paul Stanley.
That's
why you're Paul Stanley. That's why you front one of the all-time biggest, most influential rock bands in history of all-time biggest, most influential rock bands. That's why, right there, 2 speeds, on, off.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's one of those, it was literally one of those moments where, well, that's all. I mean, I have moments in time where I'm with someone and they say or do something and I go, yeah, that's why you're you.
Yeah.
That's why you're where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's my favorite people to work with, honestly. Because I feel like, and I think you're kind of describing yourself that way too. It's like, I can't not do it.
I can't phone it in.
If you're going to, exactly.
I can't phone it in. I try.
I'm not doing that.
I try.
I don't come here to do that.
Eric, I actively try to phone it in. We do rehearsals, like when we're doing rehearsal or when we're doing like run through, like day of show, like dress rehearsal. I'm like, okay, we have the show tonight, Nate. Just chill out, take it easy. Just put the dial, put the dial on 50%, man. Yeah. It just never works out that way.
Yeah. And sometimes I have, I know. Sometimes I have more fun. I mean, I don't like sound checking, in Chicago never sound checks, but so it's kind of the greatest gig ever. But I've been in other acts that do.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm like having more fun on the sound check, and like, just because like, okay, well, you got me here, I'm gonna play.
Sometimes we'll do run throughs and we record everything on the show. Like literally everything gets recorded. So sometimes we'll do a run through and maybe I'll play something and I'll play it like, like kind of cool, right? And I'll just tell Paul, my musical director, I'll be like, hey, Randy is our audio engineer for TV. And I'll say, hey, Paul, tell Randy to just use that performance tonight because I'm not going to play it anywhere near that good again.
That's always my joke. Did you get that? That was the take.
Yeah,
Did you get that one?
That
was awesome. Just play that back.
That's funny.
So you grew up in Baltimore.
Part of my life.
Yeah. And then you went to Berklee and then you came here. Did you always think about LA as your final destination, or how did that become where you wanted to be?
So first and foremost, when I finished Berklee, I was fortunate to kind of find my way into enough musical situations that I was busy. I was working. I was gigging, and between doing weddings in one band and doing rock covers in another band and a couple of original bands and so on. So one day I was driving around Boston and I was looking at houses. Because I was like, I want a house. I've always wanted to have a house because I'm a drummer and I'm loud. Like you can tell just talking around, I'm loud. Just in general, right? Not even on the drums. I'm just loud, right? I'm a loud person in general.
I've turned you down twice.
Exactly.
In a good way.
Right. So I'm driving around looking at houses. And in doing so, it kind of dawns on me. I'm kind of like, I'm not altogether certain that I've played hours a day since I was 5 years old and went to Berklee College of Music and practiced as much and put as much energy as I have into this. I'm not sure I did all those things to settle down and be like Boston's most in-demand wedding band drummer. Hey man, all due respect to whoever Boston's most in-demand wedding band drummer is. But I made the determination. I was like, I don't think that's why I did all this. I think there's something else. So the afterworld. Well, sorry.
You know the one. Doctor, everything will be all right.
Exactly. Thank you for going with me on that. So then to your point, at the time, there were a few different destinations. And I'll just be 100% honest. One of them was Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't all in on Atlanta. I wasn't gone on Atlanta. I didn't really buy it as being a music mecca.
Mm-hmm.
One was Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And although there was other music happening kind of at the time, I didn't want to play 80% country music.
Yeah. Oh, man.
All due respect to country music.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't my lane that I wanted to be in.
Yeah.
I wasn't fully, like, my heart and soul longed to play straight ahead jazz. So I took New York off the map. Not to mention the fact that another northeastern winter would have done me in. Another northeastern winter would have done me in. So essentially, I came to the conclusion, I thought to myself, okay, well, if I'm gonna struggle and suffer for my art, it might as well be in a place that's 80 degrees and sunny every day.
I tell you what, man.
And so here I am. And, and there are other non-music related intangibles that attracted me to LA. You can go from where we sit right now in North Hollywood, right? Mm-hmm. From where we sit right now, within an hour and a half, any given direction is the mountains, the beach, the desert. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue with that. So, and despite current evidence to the contrary, at the time, LA was actually less expensive than Boston, for example, less expensive than New York. Right.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to, what's it cost to go to the beach? Nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what made the decision. And before even doing that, my friends, when I was in Boston, my friends who moved to LA, I kind of saw them out doing tours and, he's on that TV show playing behind that new artist. Mm-hmm. Whereas my friends at the time who moved to New York, I'm quite certain they were very busy, but the makeup of what full-time musician looks like in New York is just different. It probably means you're playing locally 5 nights, 6 nights a week. So you're super busy and you're making a living. Mm-hmm. It's just not as visible outwardly. So all those things led me to LA. And not going to lie, I had been out here before on tours and so on. Listen, man, full disclosure, I don't mind the glitz. I don't mind. I don't mind being at Mel's Diner on Sunset and seeing like a Lamborghini roll by with camera people shooting a hip hop video. Like, I don't mind that. I think that's kind of fun, actually.
Dude. Like,
so yeah, man. Yeah.
I was here 23 years. I loved every second of it. Every time, even to the last day driving out, when I passed the Capitol Records building, on the 101, I just look at that and I'm like, God, I live here, every day.
Yeah. So how does it compare to Nashville? How are you now?
Well, I'm only there like 6 months.
That's what I was just going to say.
I don't have a lot, and I have a job, so I don't have this need to go and network right this second. I've been out a few times. People are so nice.
They are.
The thing is I had a kid.
How old?
He's 3 now.
I don't think I knew this.
3. Yeah. So
boy, girl?
Boy. Lennon.
Yes. Lennon. So cool. 3 is a great age. 3 is that age. Yeah, no. Trust me. I know.
52. It's exhausting.
I know you're not wrong. You're not wrong because I have a 6-year-old. I'm not too far removed. But 3 is that fun age where they start marching around like they own the house.
Like,
what are you doing? You're 3. Are you kidding me? Like,
yeah. And the thing is, at LA, you bring your 2-year-old into a restaurant, and they're like, all right, we'll find you a table somewhere. And everyone in the place is like, oh, my God.
See, that's you. That's you.
You bring him into Nashville.
No. See, that's you. I go to like all family friendly Chili's. I'm at Chili's, man. I'm at Olive Garden.
Yeah. Nice. I got you.
You go to fancy places. You go to fancy places.
Well, me and my wife were together for 14 years before we had a kid. So we had a life that we thought we were just going to keep living.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. No. And you know what'll happen too is very quickly, if it hasn't already happened, is you'll forget that there was ever that. Like your life, not in a bad way. I don't mean in a bad way. Right. I just mean having a kid is such a pivotal moment. It's that like I don't remember what it was like to not have a kid. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's really life-changing.
Yeah,
so I imagine you're enjoying the wide open space that Nashville affords.
Yes.
And
I mean, we got like 3 times the house.
Right.
I got a yard, it backs into the woods. I can see a free elementary school that's really great from my back porch. You know, like all those things. But there, I know of like, you know, we still like to occasionally have a cocktail. You know, I know of like 4 bars that have playgrounds in them.
What?
You know, like I'm saying, like the family thing out there is just built into the machine.
That's cool.
Like out here, it's sort of it's hard.
No,
It's not impossible. Lots of people have kids, especially since the pandemic. There was kind of a baby boom there. That's when ours came along, you know, intentionally, not like an accident. We had been trying, and then the pandemic was just like, oh, I'm off the road. We can actually really make this happen, you know? But out there, it's just part of the machine. It's like everyone has kids. Everyone's got you walk into a restaurant there and like, oh, I got 3 at home. We got a table over here for you. And you know, you don't get weird looks. Everyone looks with, oh, look at the kid. You know, I don't know. Again, maybe it's where I was going.
I would certainly say
it's a hard thing to explain because I also had people, you know, I remember a friend of mine complaining one time hearing that Reese Witherspoon had moved there because it's raised a family and he was raising his kid and he's like, whatever, dude. Like, and it's like, it's a hard thing to explain until you get there because I'm a lover of Los Angeles myself, you know, but now that I'm there, I'm like, oh, I get it. It's like this in LA, just in general, is just a hard place to live. Like parking, like every little bit of it is nothing's easy, you know?
Yeah.
But when you're people like us, like I've always sort of, and people have been like, dude, you're a warrior. Like I'm in the jungle. I enjoyed it for a long time. When I first got here, I'm like, oh, this is the jungle, man. Then we're going to go survive. The hardship is like, yeah, I live here.
Now, where did you live when you lived here?
North Hollywood for 15 years. Right. And then we moved to Van Nuys.
Right.
And bought a house.
Right. See, that's like, for people who don't live here, even though those, you know, North Hollywood, Van Nuys, even though they don't sound like LA, that's the city here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right? That's the city. Yeah. So I made the decision, would have been about a decade and a half ago almost now, to move out to the burbs. I live out in the burbs. So where I am is like super family. Like there's a playground on every other block. There's good public schools for all those reasons. Yes, definitely. If you're in what I'm going to call the city proper, if you're in Van Nuys, North Hollywood, Hollyweird, you know, usually if I'm outside and it's nice out, you know, I'm talking to someone and I'll say, you know, man, Los Angeles, just, you know, it's just too expensive. It's too expensive to live here. And then I'll look up at the sky and I'll go, but is it? You know, but is it? It's too expensive, and yet 20 million people live here.
Oh, I know. I mean, that's the thing. Well, you know, at the same time, it's like every month I pay the bills, and sometimes I'd be like, I don't know how I did it, but we did it again, you know. But it's how about this?
So many people like to bash LA, which is funny to me too, because there are never people who live here.
No.
And whenever anyone says to me, I have this sort of running joke because people would say, "Oh man, I could never live in LA. I could never live in LA." I go, "Good, we're full."
Exactly. I know. And there people are moving out of here in droves. I'm like, that's good for us. That's fine. You know, it's not, you know, those are people that don't get it, you know.
I sound like such a jerk. I'm sorry. Anyone who lives anywhere else, I'm sure that where you live is fabulous. I'm a dive bar rock
star. I'd like to take a second and thank you for listening to the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast. Getting the word out is a vital part of what it takes to keep this show on the road, and the easiest way to help is to subscribe wherever you listen, and if you have an extra minute or two, please leave a review. You can also follow our page on Facebook, which is the Dive Bar Rockstar Podcast, or follow me on Instagram at Dive Bar Rockstar. Okay, enough begging. I hope you're having a great time, and once again, thank you for listening. Well, I want to talk really quick about your YouTube channel, just because it's up there and it's great, and you have the Nate Morton cam from the show. It's like a lot of stuff from the show.
Too much, like way too much. Like, why does this guy post so many videos all the dang time?
I know, but for an aspiring drummer, it's awesome, you know, because they're really well shot.
It's something that I do because when I was coming up and I would hear Anton Fig on the Letterman show, or I would hear fill in the blank, any drummer on any show.
Yeah.
The camera was usually not on that drummer. And so I'm like straining, trying to hear, and I'm like wishing that I could see what he was playing, you know. And then couple that, I remember buying a concert DVD of the Dave Matthews Band. And there was a part, this is before, I don't know if this was before YouTube, but it was some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you could select like Carter Beauford Cam. And you could just watch the whole concert with the camera on him. And I just thought, that's really rad.
That's amazing.
YouTube has somewhat mitigated the need for that because there is so much more access now to everything than there once was. But the student, the coming up drummer, wannabe musician back then would have loved that. And so that's kind of why I do it. I do it actually, if I'm 100% honest, I do it for two reasons. Number one, that's the primary reason. The primary reason is I would have loved to have been able to see the drummer on whatsoever show. So that's why I throw it up there. The second reason is, for better or for worse, like it or not, social media is a necessary evil and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So I feel to some extent like I need to participate in that. Now, the cool side of that is people can, like, I enjoy providing some degree of access, right? And I'm a drummer. I think that's kind of the nature of drummers in general. I get messages. Hey man, what's that symbol on your right? Hey man, what's that pattern you played, you know, on that particular song?
Right.
And I love being able to respond back and be like, oh, that's a 14-inch China, you know, whatever, or that's this groove. I really enjoy that because it's something I didn't have. So I enjoy being able to provide that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's it. So yeah, so that channel is there. I'm glad that people get to check it out. And, you know, and I'm also too, I'm not monetizing anything. So it's not like I'm putting it up there and I'm making any money on it. I'm putting it up there purely for educational / entertainment sake.
Right. Kind of this podcast, honestly.
Yeah. And I've actually encouraged my bandmates. None of them have taken me up on it, but I've encouraged my bandmates that they should do the same. Like Justin, our guitar player, like guitar players would love to be able to watch what Justin is doing from song to song. And he's got plenty of content up. He's got a great, you know, social media, great grasp on social media. And he's got great content on his Instagram and all of that. But just in terms of a viewer of the show, guitar players, not even just guitar players, but you know, it would be really fun to watch what he does because he's shredding. Yeah. Homie is a shredder.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I've seen.
So is Dave, our other guitar player, in a different way. I mean, okay, so I play music. I love education. Being able to put those videos up is a combination of the two.
Yeah. And what I love about it too is that there's so much content and so many drummers, and there's a camera on them playing in their house. This is you, like practical, you know, you're playing songs with people, you know, you don't, it's a weird, I was going to ask, like, what do you think social media has done to musicianship? Because it's become this chop-oriented thing, and people are making money just by having a YouTube channel and never even leaving the house. And it's nice to see, like, here's what you do to play with actual people, and, you know, to a click. You know, it's a practical application of your skills versus, look what I can do.
The short answer in my head is there's room for it all.
For sure.
I believe. Now, to your point, yes, YouTube and social media has created a bit of a chop fest. And yes, I check some of that stuff out there, you know. I call them cartoon drummers, you know, because what they're playing is just so insane. I'm like, oh my God, that's insane what you're doing right now. I can't believe it. At the same time, I have students and I encouraged them that if they're looking for playing opportunities, that stuff is great. There should also be some amount of you just playing in the pocket, because if I'm a singer-songwriter and I normally play coffee houses with just me and my guitar, and I'm thinking about putting a band together, I'd much rather see you playing a song on a cajon or playing a groove to a Joni Mitchell song than chopping out. And the other thing too is, I think sometimes people have the misconception. I honestly believe that sometimes people believe like, oh, I'll play all these chops. People will assume that I can play all that other simple stuff if I can do all these chops.
Right. Exactly.
And I don't think that's always the case. I don't think people always want to discern like, okay, well, he's playing 14/5. And so therefore he can probably play Brown Eyed Girl. Like, I don't know.
And I mean,
maybe not.
Generally not the case in
Maybe
my
maybe
experience.
not. Maybe not. And again,
and I don't even know if it's about ability as much as just willingness, or
there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it. I've thought a lot about this, and again, I got a friend, Nate Timmel is his name. I got to say Nate so people don't think I accidentally said my own name or that I have a split personality. Right. So my friend Nate Timmel, and he teases me because he says that whenever I do these podcasts, I did one with him. He says that I'm obviously overtly concerned about being canceled. So I say everything. I try to couch everything in a way that doesn't get me canceled. Right, I definitely, do not get me wrong, I have the utmost respect for Chops Monsters, Groove Dudes, like all around. Right? If you're good at what you do, I respect you for being really good at what you do. Having said that, when I was at Berklee, there were definitely what I'll call practice room drummers. Right? So there were dudes who were literally always at the practice room, always shedding, always practicing. And then sometimes you'd hear them play out and you go, you don't really have that strong a grasp on playing with people. Right. You sound amazing in a practice room.
Yeah.
But you don't exactly have a grasp on playing with people. And I just knew like I never wanted to be that guy. My first instrument that I had piano lessons on was actually concert piano. Concert piano is a field where you spend a lot of time by yourself. Right? Now, practicing by yourself, you practice by yourself on drums. But when you play on drums, for me anyway, it's most often been with a group. I'm playing with guys and I'm looking at guys and making funny faces and we're jamming on stage and having a good old time. Whereas when you're playing concert piano, it's like you walk out there by yourself on the stage. I remember right now, it's like it's giving me like goosebumps in a bad way. I can hear the sound of my shoes, my dress shoes, as I walk across the stage to the piano, and you're in a room and there's 200 people, but it's pin drop quiet and just so nerve wracking, that feeling. So I came to drums from that. I didn't want to go from one place where I was solitudinal and lonely all the time to another place where I was solitudinal and lonely all the time. Yeah. I wanted to go somewhere where I could play with my friends.
No. That's why I'm in it too. Like it's about the conversation and like I shouldn't say hate, but I didn't like private lessons. And I don't like teaching private lessons. Like it's just, I just don't, it was never my thing. That's not why I do this. I'm all, and as a bass player too, it's like, I don't play chords. I don't play melody, like it kind of, I could, but maybe I'd have a better, following if I did, but.
I have a good friend of mine and he says because at one point, bass players with a whole bunch of crazy effects, like that became like the in thing, and especially when I was in school, like when bass players discovered like, oh, I can have a bunch of guitar effects. And so he said to me one day, he said, this is a bass player. You'll relate to this. He said to me one day, he goes, yeah, I mean, that's really great that when you play bass, you can have a chorus of cats, coming out of the amp. But while you're doing that, who's playing bass?
Right. Exactly. I like people who play bass. Play bass. And people make fun of me too because I play a 5-string most of the time. I have forever. But there's too many strings. I mean, yeah, but it's more bass. I'm not like the 6-string guys. That's confusing to me. Like, why you want to get all up in the guitar player's space?
Sure.
Like,
I'm
lower.
Now, because the rabbit hole that I usually go down is drumming related and not bass related, how would you say social media has affected bass playing? Let me put a finer point on that question. I think that there are drummers who are able to monetize strictly online content, and I think that they're happy doing so. And maybe that aspiration that we were just speaking of in terms of playing with other people, maybe that force isn't as strong within them. Are there bass players who do similarly?
Yes, I think so. And I don't have any problem with that either. Like, especially with a shrinking music business, what else are you going to do? I mean, the fact that kids have that is amazing.
That's true.
And they're never going to have to play with anybody ever, and like me as a bass player, I can get knowledge from them. I can get skill. I can look at this stuff. It's just like, I mean, it's age old. Like, I can't think of the guy's name right now, but Bela Fleck.
Oh yeah, Bela. Yeah.
But the bass player.
Oh yeah, Victor
Wood.
Yeah.
It's like I've always listened to his records and being like, I don't really want to do that, but that's cool. Like those are tricks. But then again, the dude plays bass too.
Correct.
He is a great example of an absolutely versatile player who can do everything. So don't get me wrong. I'm not dissing him.
Sure.
There's I remember he put out a double album with the Yin and Yang sign.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is got vocal tunes and stuff, and he's playing bass, and it's killing.
Right.
And the other one is kind of the trickster stuff, and that I don't. It's the same kind of thing. It's age old, but now you have guys that just do the trickster stuff, and it's fine. And it's not like I don't gain, and I'm not entertained watching them. So it's not necessarily a complaint. It's just it's interesting as a bass player being, from my aspect, trying to do more social media is tricky because I'm competing with those guys, and it feels like if I just go and play a pocket, people are going to be like, that guy's not very good. I
want to touch on something briefly before we go away from it, which is Victor. I feel like Victor. This is
Victor Wooten, by the way, for people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like Victor is. So I feel like he slaps better than a lot of guys who only slap. I feel like he plays with his fingers better than a lot of guys who only play fingers. I feel like he taps better than a lot of guys who only do that.
Yeah.
And to your point, can also just play a pocket. Whenever I think of Victor Wooten, I think to myself, I'm not sure there's a more complete bass player.
No, yeah, absolutely. I'm not
such a complete player. No, and I didn't get that. I didn't get that from what you were saying.
Yeah.
I just he comes up a lot because I think that Victor is really just a really, really complete player. Do you think that? Well, to your point, I feel like there's a little bit of a backlash. Is the wrong word, but I feel like people find it refreshing now when you don't go choptastic. I had one of my drumming heroes for a variety of reasons, but one of my drumming heroes is Kurt Pescara. And not long into the run of the show on The Voice, Kurt called me and I was like, yeah. And he goes, hey man, look, I just wanted to call you and say, thank you so much for playing songs. He said, I just wanted to thank you for playing songs. Yeah. And mind you, you may have listeners out there who've heard the show and been like, what is this guy talking about? This guy totally overplays. And I'm not going to lie, I do at times. Not going to lie, I do, right? I do at times. But that's not my go-to. I can't do that. Right. I had some point, I said I do post. And when you post, you run the risk. People go, hey, this guy's a Yahoo or whatever. Mm-hmm. So someone posted on one of my videos and we were playing some rock song. And I don't even know what it was, but I played something and someone basically posted negatively. They said, gospel chops don't belong in rock music. This is an abomination, blah, 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 blah. Right. And so I responded back and I said, thank you for thinking I have gospel chops.
Right.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Well,
the social media thing is a funny thing. The social media, and then how about AI? What's that going to do?
Oh man.
So I did a master class not long ago, and one of the young people in the class. This is a room full of kids, 12 to 16 years old, and one of them asked. I think they were like 14 years old, and they said, "What did they say?" They said something. They said something along the lines of, "How do you feel about the fate of the music industry?" Something like that. It was like, in fact, it was the kind of question where after he asked it, it should have been like lightning striking, like thunderstorm, like thunder, I think that was it. How do you feel about the fate? Yeah. It was something like that, or the future, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And his point was, I think that in his head, he was sort of suggesting that we're headed into a tunnel of darkness where like music is going to be eliminated and it's going to be all AI and there's going to be no original music anymore and the whole industry is going to crumble. And I don't know if that's the case or not. I mean, I'm closer to the end of my career than the beginning. So a young man like that, I said to him, he was 14, because I remember I did ask him, I said, how old are you? 14. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? I said, I don't really know the answer to that question, but I said, as a young person, it behooves you to figure out how you can optimize your own personal usage of AI, right? To try to do the, for your listeners, I'm going to put my fingers in my ears and go, I don't hear you. Like doing that, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? Progress only goes one direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's true.
Technology.
Yeah.
Technology just I'm not going to sit here and
I mean, I would probably argue really that just music ended 10 years ago anyways. So what's the difference?
I had a conversation with someone not long ago, and they said, the reality is your brain is wired to think that things that you experienced during, and they named some age bracket, things that you experienced in your 20s, your mind is wired to think that things that you experienced in your 20s were better than everything that came after it. And that's just the way human nature works, and that's the way your brain is wired. Yeah. And I said, well, two things can be true. I said, your brain can be wired to think that. And it can also be the case.
Yes, exactly. I know. And I play in Chicago. We play songs from the 70s, and it's sort of objectively better, in my opinion, musically.
Can I have a confession to make.
Okay.
I have a confession.
This is the podcast for, that's my other podcast. Just confessions.
I need you to absolve me.
Okay.
I have a confession to make. I have a student, and we were talking, and he was talking about Chicago. Mm-hmm. And how did it come up? Either way, this is the same people who yelled at me when I said the first guest record that I ever had was, 90125, whatever that is. 901. The first exposure that I had to Chicago was Stay the Night.
Oh, girl.
With Pizza Terra. No, I love that song. Yeah, I love that song. Yeah. But my student was not happy with me.
Oh.
And he took me back and he played me like early Chicago when it's like jazz fusion. It's like a jazz fusion.
It's progressive.
It's progressive. Yeah.
It's progressive jazz rock.
Yeah, yes, progressive jazz rock. That's and I didn't know that element of Chicago existed. I really didn't until recently being exposed to it. Yeah.
I mean, it's not uncommon. It's a tricky thing to put together a set list.
I was just going to say, what's the makeup look like? What's the makeup? Because there are people who are coming who are in their, what are we going to be in your 50s, 60s maybe, who that's what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And then you've got yahoos like me who want to hear Stay the Night. And to no one's point actually, but Gary, my student, Gary does not like Stay the Night. Because that was like the switch to like, we want to sell a bunch of records and have this thing, and produced by
David Foster.
Yeah,
that's a whole. That's like just he
wanted to smooth
Chicago
out the thing.
16, I think, but by Chicago 17, that was the big, huge kind of smash comeback record, and didn't really have a lot to do with Chicago.
And that's what Gary felt.
Yeah, it was more Peter Cetera is writing the songs now with David Foster, and he's producing everything, and it's a lot of electronics. I mean, at the end of the day, like depending on, because I've worked with a lot of them, like I've known Danny Serafin since I was a kid, so like I worked with him a lot. And
that's how it came up. We were talking about Danny Serafin. Yeah. That's exactly how it came up.
And it gets tricky for him because there's electric drums, but he also claims, and this is the thing about being in the band now. So I've worked with Danny, with Bill Champlin, and now I'm working with Lee Loughnane, Jimmy Pankow, and Robert Lamb. They're the three originals that are left in Chicago.
Got it.
And so to hear the same sort of stories from all these different sides is tricky, and but Danny says that he brought David Foster in and had a meeting, and like, they're not playing horn bands on the radio. You guys need to learn to play a synth or something, which kind of somewhat leads to his demise. I don't know. There's a million documentaries you can watch.
We went a little bit down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We went, and
but at the same time, it's like, from my perspective, we're still touring all constantly,
right.
And playing arenas and
right.
Without all those later years, would that band be able to still maintain that?
Right.
So but now it's kind of pretty much run by the horn players. So they're never going to be put back on the riser again, so those early songs are much more,
right.
And I mean, we do 97% hits. So it's not like if you went to see the show, it's not like you wouldn't be confused for that long, but we do a couple of deep cuts that are very, so it's a tricky thing for them. It's way above my pay grade. I play what they tell me to play, but
and show me a band without interpersonal conflicts. I mean,
especially 57 years. This is the 57th year of them touring. And so, they're and they have it down, and it's a really, really, really great gig, and just everything about it is amazing as a Chicago fan. But my age, like Chicago's 16, 17 and up is kind of my era.
You like those,
And we don't do anything past 17.
Well, I remember, I don't think you guys did Stay the Night. I saw you guys at
they used to do Along Comes a Woman, which is on the same record.
But then it went away.
Yeah. Now the latest stuff we do is Inspiration and Hard Habit to Break.
So here's a question. So we just discussed earlier that you're gone a little over half the year. So how about the other little less than half the year when you're home? What are you up to? Do you have a studio at your place?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So you record, you do remote recording?
I mean, again, I just moved. So I'm getting that all set up and stuff, but yes, remote recording. When I was in LA, I had a garage that I turned in. So I had like a nice size studio where I could do drums and all that stuff. So I do production stuff, and I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring that out in the new city now. But
sure. Well, but also too, you don't just have to be in the new city, right? You have, you now, thanks to Zoom and such, everybody can do things remotely.
Right.
I encourage. Obviously, you're not a student, but any of my players that I work with that are aspiring to do it, I tell them that social media is there. That needs to be part of the thing. That needs to be a cog in the machine.
Gotta have an online presence.
Yes, and your ability to record yourself.
I totally agree.
Your ability to record yourself. I'll tell you a quick story. He lied.
Hey, it's your time, man.
Hey, and you know what? And
I know you have a gig.
You can edit this out as long as I'm out your door by. My gig is at 6, Woodland Hills. It's Sunday. It won't take me that long to get out there. As long as I'm out your door. What time is it now?
2:34.
Oh gosh. Oh, we're good. We're gooder. We're gooder than good. So I have a friend named Michael, and when I first moved to town, 98-ish, somewhere in there, 98, 99, and at one point, he and I were on each other's radar. This is Michael Thompson. He's an outstanding.
Never heard of him.
Exactly.
And actually, everyone who's listening, no matter whether you know music or not, you've heard
him. Yes, you've heard him. In fact, that's exactly right. It's funny. I did a gig with him. This is a side note. I did a gig with him at a place called Lava Lee. Remember Lava Lee used to be here?
Yeah.
So we played Lava Lee, and I invited my neighbor, a guy named Scott, who was also a guitar player. Scott came to the gig, and after the gig, I saw him like a day later or whatever. And he said, before I saw the gig, I had never heard of Michael Thompson. Exactly to your point. He said, before I saw the gig, I had never heard of Michael Thompson. But then listening to the gig, I realized I've heard him like 100 places.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like,
so
one of the most recorded guys.
Completely.
Yeah.
So Michael says to me, we're doing a rehearsal at my house, and I'm just in my garage, but I've finished it. So it's just like drywall, carpet. It's a man cave.
Mm-hmm.
Michael says to me in 2000 or somewhere in that neighborhood, man, you should really turn this into a place where you can record your drums. And I remember, I think his exact quote was something like, you're not going to buy, he said, I mean, you're not going to buy your house in Malibu, but there's always going to be a little stream of income. Right. Yeah. And so I took his words to heart. It just so happened at the time I had a best friend. I still do have a best friend. His name is Sean Halley. And Sean at the time worked at, then it was Digidesign. Now it's called Avid. But he was a Pro Tools product specialist. And he really held my hand and basically walked me through computer, Pro Tools, monitors, microphones, all that. So flash forward. You ever heard of this thing, COVID pandemic? so flash forward, COVID pandemic.
Remember.
Right. I think it would have been like season, I'm going to say 18, where that happened in like 2020. The world ended. And we, being the people on The Voice, figured out a way for us to do the whole thing remotely. And it was, hey Nate, can you record your drums at your house? As a matter of fact, I can.
Yeah.
And so I just think like how fortunate that MT pushed me in that direction almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that when that rolled around, I could actually do it. Come on. Like you're talking about a learning. If I hadn't had that, like if I didn't have a place where I could play my drums, much less record them, right? Microphones, cables, knowledge of the software, computers, all the gear.
Yeah.
Had I not gone down that path, I mean, I don't know that I would have necessarily lost the gig on The Voice, but I certainly might have lost that segment of it. They might have been like, hey man, we got to get the show done and you don't know how to do it. Or it's either that, or it's me like buried in hours of YouTube tutorials trying to learn how to do this stuff.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's how I did it.
Yeah. So,
well, no, I didn't have YouTube when
but it's
I
like,
did it.
but you don't. Pro Tools is not necessarily something that you can just like get, and in a week you're super proficient at it. Especially as a drummer, because learning mic placement is a whole.
Oh man,
that's a whole science unto itself.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and the first time you like mix live drums and you're used to computers, you know, it's a whole different art for them.
And recording drums, it's like the hardest thing to accomplish initially is literally just getting the drums recorded the way they sound in the room. Like that's not easy.
No,
that's not easy. I hearken back to the kids at Berklee trying to figure out how to work an SSL console.
Right. But it's also the room too. And like some of that is just, unless you have a lot of money, it's just luck. Like my garage, I've got it finished, but I left it like vaulted ceilings. And then my brother-in-law, whose house we're at, he has a set of drums. And I was like, well, why don't you bring them over and let me see what it is. And I just put a 57 on the snare and I pushed record and I'm like, oh, somehow I lucked into this. No, this sounds awesome, you know?
Yes.
So that was me during the pandemic too. So I had this mic that I'd never used. It was like a $2,000 mic. Sent that away, ordered a 8-in interface and then cables and a set of mics, just, 57s. And I'm like, let's do drums, now I can do, you know what I mean?
I'm going to ask you a question.
A lot of it is luck, but it's so much the room too, I'm
going to ask you a question, and it's a completely random question. A little bit ago, you said that you don't enjoy teaching.
And I don't enjoy teaching private lessons.
I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that I'm not the first person who's told you that I think that you would be a really good instructor.
Well,
do you lack patience? Are you likely to yell at a kid if they haven't practiced?
Absolutely not. In fact, that's probably my downfall. It's like when I have done it, I'm like, oh, okay, you got busy. That's cool. We'll do something today. I'll show you something.
Yeah.
And then when they don't progress as fast as they want, and their parents are like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to yell at the kid, because the other thing too, because now I have a kid. And since the day he was born, I let him just roam around the studio. I'm like, I don't know, hit it. It's meant to be hit it. Play with the guitar. Don't make it precious. Make it something to play. Play. It's play.
Right.
Shouldn't be hard work, especially at your age. So, but I was, well, this is interesting about me. I don't know. It's not supposed to be about me. I'll probably edit all this out. But
no. I always do this. Whenever I do a podcast, I always start asking questions at some point.
Okay. Well, so I was in high school.
I'm practicing for the podcast I want to do one day.
Yeah, that's what you should do. Let me produce it. We'll make it happen.
Hey.
I did high school marching band percussion. I was a drummer. Okay. And then when I quit, then when I graduated and our drum instructor they had a falling out. And so I was like, I'm available. And I taught marching percussion for 9 years after that. And there was that moment in time of like, do I teach or do I want to do it? Or do I go the professional route?
You're playing bass at the time as well?
Playing bass, yeah.
Okay, so you're playing bass, but you're teaching drums.
And the only reason I end up there, and this is probably another reason I don't really like it, I should specify. Okay, so right now I'm currently doing more like production private lessons. Love it. I'm passionate about production. Like people, I've got one student, he does this thing at the church and like he wants to get better at production, so he sends me stuff and I critique it. And
are we talking live or recording?
Recording,
or both.
Recording, production.
Got it.
So I'm very passionate about that. Okay. The only reason I play bass, and I've told the story on this podcast, but it is because I played everything in high school and no one else would play bass. And I didn't want to practice, so I learned to read pretty well on it because I'm just going to show up and play. So when it came time to go to Berklee, I'm like, well, this is the instrument I can read the best on, so I should probably just give myself a good shot here, and I picked bass. But even after, Berklee, and it took me a while to say, okay, I'm a bass player, because it was never really my passion.
Interesting.
So I kind of think of it as my day job. Now we're talking 30-something years later. It's been an incredible relationship. Now I care about it more, but I still don't have that passionate thing, which I think you need to teach something.
Yes.
Which is why I enjoyed this conversation, because teaching people and helping people connect and teaching, helping people get started on their career, that's something I'm passionate about. I came to LA, I knew one guy and I made all this happen, and I love your stories, and everyone else has their own story of how they came and they conquered the city, which is not easy. So that I'm passionate about. And when I'm passionate, I feel like I am a good teacher. I had a lot of, and I said for a lot of years, it's like, I'm not sure that I made the right decision, because I've stood in front of 85,000 people and played bass notes, and people cheered, and the artist
Yes.
was like Eric Baines on bass.
Right.
And I don't think it ever felt as good as watching a kid go, oh,
Sure. Wow.
you know what I mean? Like
Wow.
that is like watching a kid just get it. And
yes.
you know, like
yes.
I'm very passionate about education and teaching, although
Yes.
I never finished college. Now it's too late, you know,
So here,
for
Eric,
a lot of reasons, like this is the best I can do, this podcast.
okay, I have so many things. I have so many things to unpack here. Number
I'm going to
one,
put my notes away, I think.
number one, yeah, that's. I don't even know why I had them to begin with. Number one, you echo a sentiment of mine, which is that I sometimes feel like if they both paid the same, right? Someone walks through that door, right? Aladdin, is that the genie? Or is
Yes,
Aladdin the prince? I think it's Aladdin, right?
I don't know.
Whoever, the genie, because Aladdin was the prince or the
Right.
dude. So the genie walks through the door and says, "I can snap my fingers, and you can either teach full time or play full time for the equal amount of money."
Right.
I'd have to give it thought,
Yeah.
because I really enjoy playing,
Mhm.
but I really enjoy teaching.
Yeah.
And to your point, watching someone get something, watching the light bulb go like ding,
Mhm.
is really. I mean, I don't mean to, use like so much hyperbole or whatever, but it's like a drug.
Yeah.
It's really like,
Oh, man.
it's really something.
I mean,
Now,
it feels significant.
100%.
And I feel like, another thing that's driven me and probably drives you is like getting better at your instrument.
Sure.
So even on all those gigs that I wasn't having a fun because, music or whatever, I was always still working on it. It was always a reason for me to be there, like personally, and that stuff. But but I don't think that but it's so much about me and me working on me. It doesn't feel as significant in the world. You know what I mean? Like as teaching, like
Right.
I still get emails from and keep in touch with students that I haven't seen in 25 years, just because I meant something to them and to their life, and they took things that I said with them. And I taught marching band, and like I knew 99% of these kids are not going to be musicians, but there's just the discipline that you get out of music. All those things that people fight to keep music in schools for is real, and that makes a difference. And I enjoyed teaching that part of it. You know what I mean?
How about this? I was having a conversation with someone recently. This is to your point. I was having a conversation with someone recently, and we were discussing the fact that when we're working with someone, because this was an instructor as well. This is a guy named Ron Tyson, and Ron runs a drum line, like a nonprofit drum line in South Central. And
cool.
we were talking about the fact that when you're working with someone, you don't realize in the moment, you can't realize in the moment just how profound your influence on them might be. Like I look back, I can look back 30 years, 40 years and think of both really good teachers that I had that had a really high impact, really big impact on me. And they probably didn't know at the time. I don't know if Grant Menifee, my drum instructor, would have known how profound his effect would be on my entire life. Grant Menifee is the person who looked at me and said, this is when I was in high school, looked at me and said, I don't say this to everybody, but if you worked your butt off at this, there's a chance you actually might be able to make a living doing this. I was like, okay, where do I sign up? And I don't know if he knew in that moment that literally he would completely and totally irrevocably alter the path of my life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I always wanted to be a drummer, so I don't want to make it seem quite like that.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think he could have realized what an impact that would have. I also look back and I remember really bad instructors that I had, not even music instructors. I'm talking teachers in school. And I remember at the time, to your point about having a passion for teaching and sort of teaching kind of being a calling. And my dad is an educator, and he's a lifelong educator, lifelong student. Education was always like in my DNA. So I remember in middle school looking at certain teachers and being like, you're a really good teacher and you're a really bad teacher. Like So I want to pivot to something though, which is this. I did not know that you had as extensive a drumming background as you have. I didn't know that you played. Actually, I didn't know that you played drums at all, if I'm completely honest with you. I am of the mindset that anyone who pursues a career in professional music, or let's say anyone who pursues a high level of achievement in music, right? Whether that's doing what we do, touring, recording, playing on TV show, or whether that's playing every weekend in a top 40 band, right? Whatever that is. I feel like if you attend college for that, Introduction to Drum Set 101 should be first semester, and Introduction to Drum Set 102 should be second semester. I think that everyone who plays an instrument should have some amount of experience playing drums. Now I've played with you before, right? And so I know what an outstanding bass player you are. I have the privilege of having experienced firsthand what an outstanding bass player you are. I truly believe most musicians, strike that, all musicians would benefit from that. Talk a little bit about how that sort of affects how you play bass, even subconsciously or consciously.
I mean, I always say I'm just a frustrated drummer. Like I probably should. I would have been a more passionate. You know, the other thing, I don't want to go too far off because I love that question. But the other thing I love about drummers is just the community and like the fellowship. You know, not 100%. To use like a church term. I'm not even a church guy, but it's just there's such a drum hang. It's just the most fun thing if you know anything about drums, which I do.
When's the last time you went to an electric guitar clinic?
Exactly. I know, totally. Yeah, exactly. And because of my teaching, I've been to a lot of drum clinics, you know, and it's a lot of fun, and it's fun to see that. But as a bass player, you have to know the function of a drum kit and what it does. I mean, I'm always saying too, like, if there's a bad drummer on the gig, I can't make them more funky. You know, there's nothing I can do in this particular, you know, genre of music.
Yeah.
You know, and as a producer, like if those drum sounds aren't right, your track is done. Like forget it. Like it really, if you're going to be in pop music or, I mean, geez, what?
Miles Davis said
the drummer in classical.
Yeah, Miles Davis said the drummer makes the band.
Yeah, for sure.
As the drummer goes, so goes the band. And I will fight anybody.
Yeah,
I will fight you.
But as a bass player, if you don't know what, you know, for me, like I said before, my mix is like kick, snare, and hat, and that's what I'm listening to the majority. Me and the kick drum are one. That's my goal of any show, which is trippy. I don't know. This is gonna send me off on a tangent.
Go. Tangent away.
I feel, but I have this theory also about a certain school of drummers and like. Ricky Lawson, Land Richards, great drummers, but they're more top end driven guys. And me, who focuses on a kick drum, I don't have as good a time.
Interesting.
You know, Ricky Lawson, amazing. Sure. But you know, I've played gigs with him, and it's like, oh, we're not. I start listening to his hat, like, oh, like his hi hats. It's like, oh, he's a hand guy, and his kick is following that, you know. And that's another thing when you're programming drums. Now I'm way out. Like if you want to sound like a certain drummer, where is he driving? Is it snare? Is that where he's keeping time? Is that what's on the click? Is it the kick that's and these are little, you know?
I need to sign up for production lessons with you.
I mean, and it's you know, as a person who I'm just hyper analytical, even when I'm on stage, like I'm just every second means something, and I want everything to be. I'm in the studio on stage all the time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I want it to sound like a record, no matter every time I pick up the bass.
Yes.
You know? And I want to be like I said before, like my joy comes from the interaction, and so. I want you to be with me and me to be with you, and let's listen and react and play.
Right,
you know?
right. You know, I discovered this because on the show, right, I've got an enormous sample size of having worked with different artists / contestants on the show. An enormous sample size. By the way, to that end, I'm about to get canceled right now. I'm about to get canceled.
Oh boy!
So yeah, I'm gonna get canceled. I'm gonna get canceled.
I'm honored.
So I have a drummer student, and he says to me, "So Nate, the singer gave me this song, but there's like 3 different versions of the song. So should I learn them all, and then when we go to rehearsal, ask them which one they want?" I said, "John, under no circumstances ask the singer what they want." I said, under no circumstances, because a number of things can happen. Number 1, they don't know what they want. Okay. Number 2, they know what they want, but they have no idea how to say it. I said, you're best to just go and just take charge and do what makes the most sense to you musically. If you need to modify from there, try that. But do not start by asking the singer what they want. And I said to John, I said to him, I said to John, I said, John, I said, so you've probably worked with what? Like, 8 singers, 10, 12, 20, 30? I've worked with thousands of singers. Trust me on this one. Do not ask them. Now, so I digress. Funny. The reason I ask you about the drumming thing is because having worked with a bunch of singers, some of whom play instruments, some of them come on and they play guitar as they're singing. They play piano as they're singing. And whether or not you have good time can make or break a performance. Like if I have to play with someone and they're singing and they don't have good time, it's really hard. Like I do have to sort of tune them out. So we had a particular performance one time, and this is the exact birth of the thought. I'm watching, and our contestant is out there, and they're singing and they're playing guitar. They're playing acoustic, let's say. Justin, our guitar player, is playing guitar, and he's playing virtually the same part, right? He's like doubling on electric or whatever it is. Okay. I can see them both in my field of view. I look at the contestant, and as they're playing guitar, literally their body is moving to the rhythm of what they're playing on the guitar. Like their body and what the rhythm is are completely like, and not in a good way, connected. Like they can't, right? And as I'm watching Justin play the same part, I'm watching Justin's butt, and Justin's butt is his butt is in time, and his butt is not changing based on what the part is. Right. Meaning Justin has good time. Justin's internal clock is not affected by, by what he's playing on the guitar. Right. And that's a certain level of coordination and or independence that you develop inherently when you play drums. Yeah. Right. How about another guy, Dave Matthews. Love or hate him, okay? Love or hate the genre, love or hate his voice, whatever. That dude has good time. Yeah. Like, watch his body language when he's playing, and watch the parts he's playing. He's playing hard crap to play, and it's second nature. And he's got that one little heel kick thing that he does with his foot when he's playing, and he's got the bob, and none of that changes relative to what the rhythm is that he's playing on guitar. Yeah. So that's why I asked you. That's why I asked that question. I really feel like a lot of people would benefit from drum lessons.
Oh my, absolutely. Yeah, if you're going to be a modern day musician, I think it's the best thing in the world.
And might I also add, hitting stuff with sticks is really fun.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just therapy. Like, dude. You know what I mean? Like I had a kit when I was a kid, and we just beat the crud out of it, and it feels nice. People say to me, no one ever comes up to me and says, oh my gosh, man, you have the fastest hands I've ever seen. Because that would be ridiculous. No one says, oh my God, you've got the most chops ever. No one says anything like that to me. They say, wow, I had so much fun watching you play. Yeah. They say, wow, you look like you're really enjoying doing what you're doing. And I say to them this. I say, what you're seeing is the marriage of two things. Number one, I started playing drums when I was 5 because it was really, really fun. And on some level, hitting stuff just takes me back to being a 5-year-old. And I say too, I marry that with the idea that even though I'm playing like, this particular polymer drum head and this particular fancy finish thing and this kind of hardware and these particular scientifically whatever sticks, at the end of the day, it's really not that far removed from a caveman hitting a log with a twig. It's not far removed at all. So whenever anyone says, you look like you're having fun playing, I go, I'm a 5-year-old Neanderthal. I'm a 5-year-old Neanderthal. That's what you're seeing right now. Just picture Captain Caveman on the drum set. That's me. Well, I think you just coined the title of this podcast.
5-year-old Neanderthal? Yeah. Do it. 5-year-old Neanderthal.
Well, they don't, I've never had a bunch of non-musicians call me up and say, hey, we're all going to meet in the park with our flutes and have a flute circle.
Right. No, that's a great point. That's a really great point. I mean, and drummers are always, I always tell people this, and you'll probably relate to this because you work with Ray and Wally, and I'm sure that they've done this before, because those guys are like freaking heroes. But like, if you're ever on tour and like you're on the bus and you're waiting to go and the bus is waiting for like the last musician to get on, it's always the drummer. They're always in the parking lot with like 3 other drummers talking about drumsticks or talking about some groove or talking about some root of it. Like that's just our nature. That's just our nature.
It's so awesome.
Yeah. Maybe it's like a community oppression, like because people made fun of drummers so much, and so we feel as though we need to gather. I always say that drumming, part of the attraction to drummers from an audience standpoint, drummers are maybe, or drumming, let's say, is maybe the most aesthetic thing going on stage. Like that's going on stage. It's like the most, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, and all due respect to anyone who plays anything else, right? But like if you're playing keyboards, there's like this much motion going on.
Yeah.
Mimics playing keys. Right? And if you're a guitar player, air guitars. There's like this much motion going on, right? So maybe that guitar player is like running back and forth across the stage. You know, maybe that's cool. Maybe they're like doing like freaking, you know, showgirl kicks and stuff. Yeah. And that's great. But just generally speaking.
But that's like contrived. It's not
correct.
Part of the music.
It's not part of the actual instrument, right? Generally speaking, the drummers are the ones that are, you know, flailing around, depending on the kind of show you're seeing, obviously. Sure. But that was what always attracted to me to it. You know, someone asked me the other day, what influenced me to play drums? And I said, Animal from the Muppet Show. And they laughed just like that, which is what most people do. But then I point out, you know, like when I was a kid, I didn't know Animal was a Muppet. Like I didn't know. I was 5 years old. All I saw was a really hyperactive, hyperkinetic, semi-out of control dude channeling that into playing drums. And I thought, okay, well, if he can channel that into playing drums, then why can't I?
And you have wonderfully.
Hence, 5-year-old caveman.
Oh, man, this has been incredible. I can't even believe it. Thank you for driving all the way out here. I know you had a gig, so maybe that was...
You're okay.
You know, that made it easy. I feel better knowing you had a gig.
Well, my gig is the opposite direction, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Look at that, man. I drove away from my gig to come hang out with you.
This is amazing.
See, that's how much I love you, dude.
All right, well, let's do this once a week. And
hey, buddy. Don't threaten me with a good time.
Well, thank you so much, man. This is just so great, and this went away I didn't even expect, which is maybe a first. I don't know. I love it.
I appreciate that. So, I'm glad.
Thanks for coming out.
You got it.
Man, what an awesome dude. Such a great hang. I had so much fun, and he's really an exceptional drummer. So check out his YouTube page. And I love the part where he talked about being on the Natalie Cole gig and just spending every second when he wasn't on stage practicing his brush chops. And it's such a great example of how you got to say yes sometimes. And, you know, I'm sure he had a minimum amount of skills and he knew he could get through the gig, but for him to take that opportunity to be making money while he's really honing that skill is a really smart thing to do. And, you know, don't say yes to everything. Make sure you can at least get through the gig, because you don't want a reputation of just not being a good musician or saying yes and not having those skills. But that was something I had to learn in Los Angeles too when I first moved there, is that if you put yourself out there as a guy who's skilled, the phone will ring and you're going to be put under the microscope and say, okay, you say there will be that opportunity. You say you can do this. Here we go. And you want to be ready for that too. SSL console. SSL stands for Solid State Logic, which is a brand of a console, which is short for mixing console. And that's that big thing with all the knobs that's kind of at the center of a control room in a recording studio. And Cher is 77 years old, according to the internet. Well, I hope you had a great time. I sure did. And I will talk at you next time. Wow, you've made it to the end. I'm hoping it's because you completely enjoyed yourself and are now filled with knowledge and inspiration to move forward with your dreams. If that is the case and you would like to stay informed of new episodes, live events, and general news, please go to divebarrockstar.com and sign up for the mailing list. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or complaints about anything you hear on the show, please email me at fanmail@divebarrockstar.com, and you may even end up on the show. We at the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast, with all of our hearts, thank you for listening, and remember, it's all about dreams.